Yeah.
With YouTube feed starts.
You're good to go.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. This is the Landmarks Committee of Manhattan Community Board 5. My name is Leila Lovizico. I'm the chair. We are here tonight to review 3 applications that came to our office for review. A few words about how the meeting is going to proceed. Each applicant will have an opportunity to give a full and uninterrupted presentation. Following this presentation, members of the committee will have an opportunity to ask questions. Once this question session concludes, I will open up to members of the public who will have an opportunity to ask questions and make comments to the application. Then we will move to business session. During business session, only members of the committee are allowed to discuss the matter. We will do exactly that. I will see comments from all of you members of the committee. Following this comment period, we will make a motion, and this motion will be taken to a vote by members of the committee. The vote taken by this committee will then be presented to the full board of Manhattan Community Board 5, and the full membership will vote on the motion that was approved tonight. The full vote of Community Board 5 becomes the official position of the board. This official position will then be forwarded to the Landmarks Preservation Commission, as well as relevant elected officials. Tonight, as I said, we have 3 applications. The first one is 200 Park Avenue South. This is an application for proposed modifications to an existing storefront at the northern bay along Park Avenue South in order to construct a new egress stair from the cellar to the first floor street. Do we have the applicant online to present this application? If we do, you can unmute yourselves. And the floor is yours. You can introduce yourselves, your team, and tell us about this application.
Okay, good evening, Community Board 5. My name is Mike Rosani. I'm with Michael Zenreich Architects. And as mentioned, we have an application to modify the storefronts at 200 Park Avenue South at the northernmost bay along Park Avenue South. My office worked on these original storefront installations back in 2011, and we had gone to a public hearing at that time as well for tenants that are no longer in the building. And this modification came about as a result of the space being vacant and the owner of the property looking to redemise the building and upgrade the egress from the cellar. And I can show you some of that within the plans of the presentation, why we're trying to upgrade the egress. So there's some historic tax photographs of the property and the building. These are some recent photographs of the building facing along 17th Street. Our work is here at the northernmost bay on Park Avenue South. These are some close-up photographs, part of the scaffolding, but they are undergoing local law 11 work right now. So this is the section of the storefront that we're looking to modify, this last bay, to install a new door for an egress stair. So this is our existing cellar floor plan and our existing first floor plan. Now you can see in the cellar right now, our office also handled obtaining a C of O for this property for the first floor in the cellar. And we ran into a lot of difficulty because this is the tenant space presently. And the egress that we have from the cellar, there's a stair here that's existing, and there's a stair over on this side. And the problems that we kept running into at the building department was that in order to get to this stair, you had to pass by this stair. And at the time, they had given us approval to do that, but the times have changed, and we know it's not a great situation. And we felt that in order to better utilize this space for the building, that it was wise to construct a new egress stair along the northern portion of the building. So at the first floor, you can see a new enclosure, stair going up to the street. Here's an elevation drawing showing that last bay being modified with a new door and a side light. We have some section drawings, so you can see that the elevation of the sidewalk along Park Avenue South is a bit lower than the elevation of the first floor because of the slope of the street. So our stair is actually stopping at the sidewalk level, not at the first floor level, and it will be going directly out to the street. Here's a section from the other direction showing the return of the storefront to the door. And these are details, a detailed blown up plan of that modification. This mullion will be replaced in the same location to allow for this new entrance door, egress door. And all of the other details that I'm showing here is what was previously presented to the community board and to the full Landmarks Commission when we obtained approval for the storefronts back in 2011. So we, it's the same ownership. We have all the shop drawings and materials and everything, lined up. So we know that we can match the exact profile of the storefront that's there with this modification. So that's really all I have to say about this. I'd love to answer any questions if there are any.
Excellent. Can you just speak about the materials that you're going to use for the door?
So the door will be in keeping with the existing doors that are in the building. I believe they were like a steel door with glass panel. So we're going to maintain that same look of the adjacent doors. You give me a second. I want to stop my video because sometimes I get a little bogged down with that. So you can see this is the typical door for the building.
Okay, so it's not a Herculite door.
No, absolutely not. No, it is a frame door.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, the only difficulty with this, because of the sidewalk slope, is that the door will be around 11 feet tall. I can tell you the exact amount when we go to that building section here. We can see in the elevation that it is a frame door. It's not a Herculite door. So yeah, because we're keeping that transom bar that divides the windows above, the door is going to end up being 11'6" tall. But given that it's an egress door, and we'll have to put some actuators on it to make it easily operable.
Okay, all right. I will entertain questions from members of the committee. You can raise your hand to indicate that you have a question. Laura.
Yes, my question is the egress for the tenants only, or for people from, because the reason I ask is how will this modification impact accessibility for the tenants, including those with disabilities?
Oh, that's a great question. So you can look at, this is our first floor proposed plan. If anybody's familiar with this location, up until last year, this space was split. This first floor was split between Sephora on the west side and Elizabeth Arden had a spa that took the right portion or the east portion of the ground floor and the entire cellar. Both of those tenants have left. So what we're doing is demising the space into 3 tenant spaces. We have a space here, we have a space here, and then there's a third space along Park Avenue South. This egress stair that we're proposing is for the corner tenant, which will have the entire cellar, because there's an existing convenience stair and an elevator down to the cellar for that space. Other work that we are doing in the building, I have about 7 applications for this building right now, but we are reconstructing the entrance ramp off of 17th Street into this space, because when it was originally constructed, it didn't meet ADA guidelines. So we're actually construction started on this last week. So this ramp is being modified. And this space towards the back, which used to be part of Sephora, and they had direct ADA access from 17th Street. But now that we've separated it, What we're doing is keeping the existing entrance here, and we're installing an ADA lift within the space to get patrons from the street up to this level. So this new stair that we're doing is strictly egress for the cellar. And you can see the entire cellar floor plan here. And this is just egress. It's not for entrance or anything like that. They do have the elevator, as I mentioned, that brings people down to the cellar. So I think that might answer your question.
Yes,
I actually have a follow-up. Please explain to us why you need this egress. Is it for code purposes, and how do you anticipate it would be used?
It's definitely from a code perspective. Egresses are supposed to be separated by 30 feet. And the problem that we faced with this space was that this was the only entrance into this corridor to get to these two means of egress. And when we had our C of O inspections, we had an approved plan and we passed and we obtained C of Os, but plans can be a bit deceiving. This is a public corridor, but this is really like a staging area for the building superintendent. It's filled with materials and snow blowers and electrical cords, and there's a giant exhaust duct that wraps right down this middle here, and the head height is only around 5'6". So it's not a really good egress location. And knowing how stringent the Department of Buildings has gotten over the past couple of years, going back to them to say, hey, look, we want to, have this occupancy down here, but we want to keep the way the egress was. It just wasn't something that we thought was going to be permissible. So we thought in everybody's best interest, including the owner of the property, they felt that we should bite the bullet and install a new egress stair while we have possession of the space. We don't have any of the spaces leased yet. And that way we can kind of have control over things without being locked into a lease and square footages and stuff like that.
Okay, that's very helpful. Other questions, Tony?
When you say egress, is it fair to say an emergency exit, or is it for everyday use as an exit?
It's an emergency exit. It would be our second emergency exit from the cellar.
If I could ask a follow-up.
Yeah.
Is there a reason that you're choosing to do it recessed, which makes that very prominent from the street versus having it flush?
All the other entrances, as you can see in the floor plan for the building, all of the doors that were installed previously were recessed from the storefront. So we're keeping the exact same idea. The only difference is this is a single door versus all the others are double doors.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Brad.
Can you talk a little bit about the impact of this on the existing surroundings? Obviously, you're going to be demolishing one bay, but can you talk about how it's going to be anchored into the building? I think that's to the north on this, and the impact on the sort of existing fabric of the building for this installation.
We don't expect any impact, to be honest with you. And about 5 years ago, we actually did a restoration of this last column. So these coins are actually new, as well as the scroll work and the marble. So we have existing framing here in this location. And actually all the anchoring that will occur at this location will be recessed from this point. It's going back to 18 inches. So when the door opens to the street, it doesn't project more than 18 inches from the property line. So all that will be interior, and it won't have any effect on the exterior framing of the building.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? Yeah, Karen.
If the door is glass, will you be able to see in, or will it be like a frosted glass or some kind
I
of?
believe we're
laminate?
going to do it as a frosted glass. I also, at the same time we did this, I worked on 222 Park Avenue South, which is just one block north. And that's where Rothman's moved from 200 Park up to their current location. And we did a similar thing there with an egress stair where we had frosted glass. And it kind of just, because you don't want people just looking down to a barren staircase. It's not very attractive from the street.
No. Yeah.
I actually have a follow-up on my prior question. In your drawing, the section, if you could go to that, I think it's page 401. You're showing that coining returning into the building. Are you going to be providing new material there, or what's happening in right to the left of where your cursor is?
That's a really good point. I think I was a little overzealous when I drew this. This actually, you brought up a great point. I think I put this together very quickly because it was moving fastly, and the coins actually stop in this location here. and the marble at the base. So we'll have to address the infill here in terms of how do we address that, whether it's, extending those coins or, I'd have to speak with Landmarks and see what their preference would be, but that's a great point.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah,
very,
good
very
point.
good point, because this actually has quite a bit of prominence as you walk up Park Avenue South. Other questions? Barbara,
What's on the other doors that are recessed? What do they have on the sides?
Well, they're within storefront bays, so they
Ah,
don't connect to the
I see.
stone necessarily.
Yeah,
Um, We can kind of
And-
zoom into here. This is the other entrance here. And you can see that, they're just within the storefront where they're recessed.
yeah. Would you consider making a commitment to this board that you would use matching material and, carry on the stone pattern?
I don't think we would have any objection to that. Like I said, we just replaced portions of those in the past, so we have suppliers and people that can do that, and I think it would be the right look for that installation.
Okay, great. Yeah, Brad.
Guess I'll phrase this as a question, because an alternative to this would be that you could move it to the central bay of that glass. It would take up a little bit of the leasable area, but that might be a good way to do this, don't you agree?
Well, it's from a marketing standpoint, it would really destroy the tenant space.
Sure.
So I'm always in the middle here between the construction side and the brokers that are trying to lease the space. And we have gone to lease for this last space, actually. So this is kind of what we're putting all our money on at this point in terms of what we'll be able to accomplish for approval, because we have a lease out there right now for this space.
Maybe let's go to Zul, who didn't have a chance.
Just a
and then I'll
follow
go
up to your two questions. What material are we talking about?
You mean for the
For the infill.
yeah, can you speak to the material of the existing column? I think it's granite and marble, but
Yeah, so this is granite. These are not marble. I believe they were, I don't remember exactly. I could send over tomorrow morning the specs of what we used for this repair, but I don't remember that off the top of my head. It's been quite a while since we did that, but this is a granite base. And these are all new, actually. You can see the difference between here and here. So these are all new.
and is it a natural stone or?
Yes,
is it
it's a
one of
natural
those-
stone, yes.
Okay, so maybe marble, maybe limestone, maybe. other-
Yeah,
okay.
I think they were limestone, to be honest with you.
looks like. one.
Yeah, it looks like limestone. Okay, Tony.
Just because it's a deep reset, are you planning any lighting at all in here?
We were not planning any lighting. Typically for residential entrances, you have to provide lighting. This is a commercial building, so we didn't really think of any additional lighting to be provided at that location. None of the other entrances have lighting above the doors.
Can you actually put the elevation back on the screen? Because the way you're designing it sort of like throws off the symmetry of this bay. And I'm just wondering if there's a way, like, can you make the door wider or like, can you center the door so that it looks more symmetric within this third bay, which then would
You'd have to set that.
potentially resolve your return issue.
Well, I don't think we would resolve the return issue because we would still have to set the door back from the present elevation. So I'm just getting to the detail plan here. So this is basically, this mullion is being replaced in the same location for one that returns back. We didn't really consider centering it because I thought having two smaller pieces of glass on either side would be a little bit too much, because right now these are 2'3". So if we split it, you would only end up with a 12-inch piece of glass on either side. So it'd be a little bit more busy than it is now.
I mean, we are, I will defer to my colleague Tony, who is
Just gonna bring that up in
all
comments.
about symmetry. Well, we may have an opportunity to phrase it as a comment so that we can really get feedback from the applicant. So if you feel like saying, wouldn't
Phrase it
you
as a
think
question.
at the end, I will certainly entertain it.
Well, I mean, in addition to what you've said already, I think that's plain and simple. I mean, so when we look at the exterior, we're looking at symmetry. This third bay, having that off, it seems like it would make more sense. So it sounds like to the applicant, you haven't explored what it would entail to center that within that third bay and have the two small side lights, right? That wasn't something that you explored yet?
Honestly, we didn't take it as a serious contender in terms of the layout, just given the space and making it more busy and adding the extra mullions and the extra framing. It might
do
be
you think-
symmetrical within that third bay, but it would kind of make the entire storefront bays seem a little bit too busy to us, and we didn't really entertain that.
Is that something that the ownership would consider if it's the committee's, thinking on that? Is that something that they may consider?
I don't know if they would consider it or not. I think aesthetically, though, it would just, to me personally, as the architect, I don't think it's something that we would get any benefit from. So if we were to take this and imagine the door centered with, a painted glass the width of this mouse on either side of it, it seems a little too busy to me.
Actually, if I can add something sort of like arguing against my own point, we're looking at it in elevation, but it will not be built in elevation. And because it's going to be recessed, it is going to read very differently. So maybe it is better to have it the way it is designed.
Because the entire bay
Will
is getting pushed
will be
back.
recessed.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Yeah, the elevation is.
Well, if I
distorting
can
it.
make a point too, like if the door slid to the center or to the end and it were to save like the coins, I would say I'd be in favor of it. But I think one thing also we didn't mention is you need 18 inches on the push and 12 inches on the pull to
Yeah.
meet accessibility.
Yeah.
So that's why you have that wider piece of glass there. So
Yeah.
if it was centered and you had something like 11 and 11, you wouldn't satisfy that code. And I
Yeah.
agree, it would look very sliced.
Yeah,
And you bring up a good point. With it recessed in shadow, it's not gonna be as perceivable.
it's not gonna read
Mhm.
the way we see it in elevation. Okay, all right, we are, I think we're convinced. I mean, we can always comment, but I think we're good with it. Yeah, Mike.
One more question, if I may. If we had to make a guess how many times a day, a week, a month, a year, that door will be actually used for people to leave the location, what would be an intelligent guess that you would make?
I wouldn't assume that this door is going to be used for daily egress for the tenants of the space, whoever that may be. We don't have a lease yet for that space, but it wouldn't be like if it's a retail store, patrons wouldn't be exiting through that door. This is a strictly emergency exit. So it's not something that we're anticipating that will get normal use.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Okay, all right. Any other questions? Questions? Okay, seeing none, let's open up to members of the public. Do we have any members of the public who wish to comment on this topic? You can use the raise hand function and then you will be permitted to speak. Any comments or questions from members of the public? Okay, so seeing none, let's move to business session. Comments from members of the committee? Any comments? In favor, opposed, concerns? Yeah, Brad.
I think with some of the concerns that we've raised about the material on the return. I'm trying to think of some of the other ones, but basically, I think the questions that we've asked and sort of the conclusions we've come to, I don't have any concern with adding this. It seems like a good improvement on the interior of the building for life safety. And so I would be in favor with the stipulations that we've already sort of raised.
Yeah. I see lots of head shaking.
Laura,
Nodding.
I concur with Brad. I also support the application, the applicants, I should say applicant's proposal for the modifications to the existing storefront for the addition of the egress. Especially in terms of enhancing the accessibility and safety. Yes, I'm in a healthcare
Yeah.
field. I would say, yes, please, emergency.
Yes, no, absolutely. Okay, so it seems that we know where this is going. Just to make it very clear, we understand that we have a verbal commitment from the applicant that he is sympathetic to the idea of carrying the material. I'm going to actually get out of turn and ask another question to the applicant. Sir, would you be able to confirm to us within the next 2 weeks that you have a formal commitment from the owner of the building, that the stone treatment would carry on as it currently exists on the column?
Absolutely, in the next, some point this week, I'll have the drawings updated to show the inclusion of those materials based on the repair work that we did previously. And I can share that back with the community board so you have a record of it, and that's what we'll be submitting to Landmarks for our public hearing, which is scheduled for October 31st.
Okay, fantastic. All right, so moving back to business session, my comment is that I feel comfortable that we can issue an approval, trusting that the applicant is agreeable to our recommendation, and that they will submit revised drawings, and that those drawings will be submitted to LPC. Of course, if that were ever to change, for whatever unforeseeable reason, we can always revisit the vote, because we're really basing the vote on the fact that we trust that our recommendation will be incorporated in the final design. So if someone can make a motion, and then we can take this to a vote.
Motion to approve?
Second.
All right. Brad, do you want to do the roll call? Sure.
Riz,
Yes.
Garcia,
Yes.
Hirschberg,
Yes.
Havek,
Yes.
Longissico,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
Pedrazi,
Yes.
myself, I mean, yes, Spandorf,
Yes.
Testa,
Yes.
Zolkowitz,
Yes.
motion passes.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you all. Have a good evening.
Thank you. The next application is for 1000 Fifth Avenue. This is the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and this is an application for the modification to the screens in the interior landmark Great Hall. You must be wondering why we are reviewing an application that is very clearly in CB8. But it is because of its impact on Central Park, and Central Park being a scenic landmark on which all the community boards that are abutting to the park get to weigh in. This is why we are seeing this application with much gratitude to the applicants, because we know it's not easy to visit so many community boards. So we're very appreciative of your attending and appearing in front of this committee. I think we have the applicants. You can unmute yourselves, introduce yourselves and the team, and tell us all about this application.
Hi, thank you all for having us. My name's Brett Guyard. I'm the head of capital planning at the Met, and I'll be presenting the project. I think 3 of my colleagues are on this call as well. Natalie Omari, Nora Yaya, and Amy Lamberti are also here. So we can answer any questions that you might have as they come up. Is it okay if I share my screen?
Absolutely.
Okay, let me do that. See if this works. Okay, can everybody see?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So this is a small but mighty project for us, and our architects are Beyer Blender Bell. They do a lot of work for us and all over the museum, but we pay special attention to the historic interior of the Great Hall. So I'll just walk you through the presentation and then answer questions at the end. So just to look at why we're here, as you stated, we're in Central Park. So we go to all 5 community boards around the park anytime we make a change at the interior of the Great Hall of the museum or anywhere on the exterior of the building. We meet with Landmarks first, we talk through the project, and then we kind of go through the process of either a certificate of no effect or a public hearing for the change. So the area we're talking about today is one of the few interior landmarks in the city. I think there's about 30 total, and this is one of them, which is the Great Hall. So anytime we make a change here, we always talk to Landmarks first. And the reason we're here is because we want to install 4 digital displays in the vestibules adjacent to the actual Great Hall, but it's part of the historic interior landmark. And there's a new rule at Landmarks, I think it's about 5 years old, that even though we're not altering any of the historic fabric, because we're installing digital screens, we go through a public hearing process. So that's why we're here. This is the area that probably many of you are familiar with, which has the information desk. This is up the main steps into Fifth Avenue. Can everyone see my hand moving around? Just so, okay. Yeah. and so even though this vestibule area is actually kind of outside the volume of the Great Hall, it was part of the original Richard Morris Hunt building in 1902, and it's part of the designated interior landmark. So a lot of people, including, some people in the Met, I think don't realize, because it seems like it's outside of the Great Hall, that it was actually built as part of the original 1902 building. So these are just some photographs that look at the changes over time of the Great Hall. They're fun to see. This was what it looked like when it originally opened. It was used as a gallery for sculpture. And then as more people started coming, less sculpture was in the space so that there was more space for visitors. In 1917 and in the 1940s, it's changed over time in terms of what's in this space, but the architecture has always remained the same. And then again, in 1992, this was a part of the Kevin Roche restoration of the Great Hall. So you can see back here the kind of salmon colored walls. And I'm highlighting this because this is actually the zone that we're talking about. So what we're proposing to do is install 2 screens on the north side and 2 screens on the south side within this vestibule on the plaster walls that are painted salmon color, so not on the stone. And you're probably looking at this and are already there. That's because during the COVID crisis, we got a temporary permit from Landmarks to put screens there so that we could get information to our visitors as things were changing very frequently. And we were trying to minimize the number of staff that had to be in contact with visitors, but remain open to the public. So we weren't printing as much material at the time, and these screens were really helpful to us. We've kind of reevaluated now that we're almost at 80% of our visitors. Do we still need them? Do we want them? Are they useful for us? And the answer is yes. And so now we would like to go through this process to make them permanent. So that's why you'll see them in some of the pictures that we're talking about. This is just a photograph of 2012, just to show you the wall. We'd had posters there almost always that were static posters on the wall that displayed information. Again, it was very hard to change the information on these walls without wasting a lot of paper and staff time reprinting. These booths that you see in this photo have since been removed. And in 2019, we consolidated all of our ticketing into one space adjacent to the Great Hall. So these are no longer there. And you can see we have a digital display in that ticketing space. This is not in the Great Hall, it's adjacent to it. That's been really useful for us to display information about exhibitions that are coming up and ticket pricing and policies at the museum. So that's kind of the precedent for why we were thinking maybe we could do this in other places. So the proposed design is to have these 4 screens, 2 on the south and 2 on the north. So you can see in that location that they're in these vestibules that are directly adjacent to the main volume of the space. This is 1 dome, 2nd dome, 3rd dome. And this is an elevation looking at the proposed screen location. There's data and power already there, so we're actually not ripping out the walls. The physical attachment is 4 screws that are holding up the mount for the screens. The goal of the screens is to have them read as posters. So we're not going to have anything animated or changing frequently. It may change on a daily basis, but then it stays static. And that's just so that we can get information to our visitors as it comes up. I think the next slide kind of shows what we're hoping for. So you can see we're open late on Fridays. It's really nice for us to be able to tell our visitors that without having to print information, or if something's coming up, or if there's a tour, we can have the information up about the guided tours that day, so that we don't have to print paper that says that. We will still have printed maps because people love the maps. We're not going to get rid of those, but we'll have another one over here that if there's anything closed or something needs to change, we can do that. And then information about some of the departmental exhibitions that we might not have. I'm sorry. Of course, my computer is going to start. All right. And then down here, you can see this red dashed line. That's the location of the existing screen that we installed temporarily. And what we've realized is that, first of all, it's slightly too large. So we want to go to a smaller screen. We had originally had it closer to the entry, and that's because we thought at the time we were going to have a mobile desk there during this kind of COVID crisis time. We decided not to. So now we just want to center it on the wall because we think it looks better. Again, the data and power is actually kind of right here, so we don't need to make a new hole for that, and make this screen slightly smaller. And we have a new mounting bracket that brings it tighter to the wall. So I think the next slide, sorry, it takes a while to load, is a drawing, a fairly detailed drawing that just kind of shows the actual work. So this is an elevation. You can see it says existing recessed power and data box. That's there. All the existing to remain. So you can see in what we're talking about, really the physical change is a wall mounted bracket behind the screen itself that's going to be mounted to the wall. So if in the future we decided that we don't want these screens there, we would discuss it with Landmarks, and we would be able to patch and paint the wall, take them off. And if we were to ever change the technology, we would go back to Landmarks and review that with them as well. So this is the next slide. I apologize, it's taking so long, is actually just the same elevation looking the other direction. So it's mirror images on both the north and south walls. For whatever reason, the drawings always take a long time. So you can see we have things already on that wall, clocks, security cameras, things like that. And centering this just kind of centers it right on the light, centers it in between the columns. We just felt like it looked better in the space. And so this is a photo showing the temporary screens. So you can see they're a little bit, they look a little strange popping out. So we want to bring them back and center them and make them a little bit smaller so that we can still have the information there. This is a view of the temporary screen up on the wall. And you can see we kind of have it read like a poster with these 3 bays. We did look at having 3 separate screens for a total of 6 on each side, but that was just more holes in the wall, more things to break, more complicated. So that's why we decided to do the one large screen. This is a view from the side. We felt like it was sticking out a little bit too much, so we got a new mount that's going to bring it closer to the wall. And this is a photo montage. Again, it's hard to tell, but you might be able to see it. The same view looking at the temporary and the proposed, kind of centering it on the light. Just another view of the Great Hall, showing the temporary screens and kind of the other things that are already in the Great Hall, and then a view of the bracket that we would be attaching to the wall. So, essentially we're just coming to you all to get your feedback and opinion on the 4 screens. There's no other changes in plan to the Great Hall. It's staying as it is. We will come back to you in the future if we do, start to think through other changes. But that's it for now.
Great, thank you very much.
Yeah.
All right, let's jump into questions. Members of the committee, are there any questions? Yes, Karen.
Some practical questions. If you could give the size of the proposed dimension, the length and the width, and then the depth with the new bracket, how much it will be projected. I understand the maximum is 4 inches, so I wonder if it's less than 4. And then also the second question is, what is the brightness, if you're able to quantitate that, and could it be dimmable, or maybe what are the hours? Is it always on when the museum is open? And talk a little bit about how far away you might see this LED screen.
Yeah, sure. So the dimensions of the screen are 6 foot 2 inches wide by 3 foot, just 3 foot 6 inches. I'm just having trouble looking at you and the drawing. Let me just zoom in, sorry. 3 foot 6.5 inches high. They're mounted 3 foot 3 from the ground. That's so it's high enough so people don't bang into it, but low enough that someone in a wheelchair can read it. And the projection, it's definitely at 4. I'm just looking to see if it's under 4 on the drawing. Because by code, it can't project further than that. And I think the temporary screens, the mount that we could get because of supply chain issues and other things was projecting farther than we wanted. Let me just see if it shows it on the drawing. If it doesn't, it's something that you can,
Yeah, it says 3.5 on your section drawing on.
Oh, good. Thank you. Sorry, you see me leaning in like this to look. Yes, so 3.5. So it's just under 4. In terms of brightness, that's a great question. And honestly, I don't know the answer if they're dimmable. We can get you the answer to that. They are on when we're open to the public. We're constantly struggling with not disturbing this historic space, but getting information to our visitors. So it's a balance of, we don't want them to disturb the space, but we do want our visitors to be able to see that there is information, especially when it gets really crowded and sometimes they can't find a person to help them. They can see that there's information and go over and look at it. So that's the balance we're trying to strike. I don't think it says on the cut sheet what the brightness is. I don't think we can adjust it, but I think that might just be something I have to get back to you on because I don't know the answer to that. And I'm not sure if any of my colleagues on the call would know that either, unfortunately. But I'm going to look while we're talking and just see if it says.
Yeah, let's see if there are any other questions. Yeah, Tony.
Will there be any advertising?
No. So the only information we have is about the Met. So we may have information about shows, right? So what exhibitions are on, where there's a dining location in the venue, in the museum itself, like the 4th floor is where there's this and the, basements where there's that, but no, there's no outside advertising anywhere in the museum. Yeah.
Thank you. Brad.
If you were to remove this, or let's say the technology changes and you want a better screen and that changes or whatnot, all these changes, would they come back? And I don't know if this is a question for the applicant or for you, Layla, but would they come back to us to review those changes, or would you be able to make those unilaterally without returning to the community board?
So we would always go to Landmarks anytime we make a change to anything. So if we wanted to change the screen, we would meet with Landmarks staff and discuss it with them. We would defer to them on the process of whether we needed to amend the filing or go back through the hearing process. I'm not sure I know the answer to that. I would assume that they would use their judgment depending on the scale of the change, whether or not we would go back through the public hearing process. But typically, any change we make, we do have to go through this. So I would assume that we would, I think, except if we remove them. If we remove them and just patched and took it back to how it used to be, I would assume we wouldn't have to go through the process again to take them off completely. But if we were to change technology, we would, I think.
Typically, if the change is within scope of what was approved, then it would not come back to us. If it is materially different, a bigger screen, more screens, different type of projection, it would, keeping in mind that lighting is actually not under the purview of LPC. So anything that, if it is the same type of, physical framing, but the projection type is different, it would not come back to us.
So if they decided they wanted to do animation,
that would not come back to us.
Yeah, but I will say we talked to Landmarks about that, and that's a non-starter with them for us to animate these. So that was part of the discussion, that they would not let us change this to be animated screens or have something changing. The kind of agreement was that it would read as these posters.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Other questions, members of the committee? Yeah.
You spoke several times about these new screens in relation to what the ones that are there currently that were put up during the pandemic, almost as a last minute, kind of thing. Was there any discussion among your team or among Landmarks about whether or not this was the best place to display information in the Great Hall? Or is this more of a discussion about how to best adjust these screens that were put in
during the pandemic?
Yeah, so there's been lots of discussion on that. We had actually started after we opened the ticketing hall in 2019, and we had the screens in there, which were outside of the grade, not in the landmark designated space. We had already started talking about like, we need to be able to have information that can change depending on what's happening in the museum. So we used to have these printed pamphlets called What's On that were handed out on a weekly or sometimes even a daily basis, depending on how fast things were changing. And there was a desire from our design team and external affairs team and others to stop doing that because it was incredibly wasteful and also just arduous for the staff. So we kind of started discussing it then. If left up to some of our stakeholders, they would want huge screens in the whole Great Hall, right? They want to capture people right when you walk in. So that was a huge discussion. Like, we're not going to even go down the road of pursuing attaching something to the limestone or the stone floor or something that we would not be able to reverse. Because, I think we all know with technology, there's always a desire to be able to reverse something because it's changing constantly. So that's why it led to, we will only even consider this idea if it's on the plaster because we know we can patch and paint and repair it and get rid of it. And there's also precedent historically, when you look at all those photos, for things being attached to the plaster. Sometimes there were tapestries, sometimes there were other things that were attached to the plaster, but nothing was attached to the stone permanently. And so that was a big part of the decision. So then when you look at the Great Hall, you really only have two places where it's plaster, which is the north and the south, where you can kind of, it's a compromise, right? It's not ideal for our visitor experience team and security team that it's that far away from the main space, but we felt like it was a reasonable approach to being stewards of that space, but also kind of acknowledging our stakeholder needs. And then because, as you guys mentioned earlier, this is an arduous process for us to go through for the screens, we kind of reevaluated it again before we started this process. So I think it was like 3 or 4 months ago, we said, hey, listen, our temporary permit's going to expire. Do you really want these screens? Like, we'll go through this for you, but like, do you need them? And are they in the right place? So they did some analysis with the visitor experience team and the security team. And they did find, and membership as well, that the screens are useful, that people are using them. Visitors line up in the middle, and then if they need information, they can step aside and look at the screen, and they can back in line. So that's why we landed on that location. And we do feel like we want to keep them, that they're useful for our visitors, and that the location is a compromise, but one that kind of respects all the different voices on that very important public space. So I hope that fixed it, but that's how we came up with that.
Thank you. Just one quick question. Are those screens interactive?
No.
Okay.
And we don't
And
want
this
them to be for a whole variety of reasons.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, Mike.
Do they both show the same images or are they different?
So we on the north side and the south side, we have two screens on either side. And so the screen on the left and the screen on the right do show different information. So one always has a map of the museum that's it's like a poster that's static, basically. And it doesn't change. And then the exhibition. So kind of what I showed in that slide with the elevations, where one side had, we're open late tonight or new information, and the other side had the map. That's how we've been using them. And that's been working for us. In the future, if our visitorship dramatically increased and we couldn't rely on people going to both sides, we may have the same information on both sides, but I haven't heard anyone say that yet.
I meant the north and the south.
Yeah, the north and the south, for the most part, are the same from my understanding. To be honest, I haven't stood there and looked at it, but we've been told that they're using them as mirror images because our visitors kind of come in and some go to Egyptian and some go to Greek and Roman. So they want to capture both of them.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Other questions? Okay. So seeing none, I will open up the floor to members of the public. Do we have any questions or comments from members of the public? Members of the public, you can use the raise hand function on Zoom to indicate that you wish to speak. Questions, comments? Okay, so seeing none, let's move to business session. During business session, only members of the committee can discuss the matter. Comments, Zul.
Comment. So even though I'm in the movie business, I really find it troubling the proliferation of screens in the public space. But I think a lot of the concerns have been addressed, and I'm very glad to hear that Landmarks would not allow an animated screen. So that's very helpful. So it's not going to be flashing. And I think you've answered well in terms of the sizing. It seems it's very similar to the posters that have been in there in the past. Tony's question, I was glad, well answered. No advertising. I take that also means no sponsorship. So we're not getting, the various philanthropies in there as well. Advertising, that it's wheelchair height. That's very helpful. I think Karen's question, though, is a very important one in terms of the brightness of these screens and whether or not they are dimmable, because if it's very, very bright, that could really be disturbing. But I think you've really addressed, this is clearly the way that the public really looks for information so much of the time when they go into an area where they're looking for directory and maps and other things. So I don't think there's an objection, but I think this is an important question.
The brightness, yeah. I mean, typically screens are dimmable, whether computers or, TV screens. So, it is likely to imagine that they would be, yeah, Barbara.
Yeah, I mean, I also am in favor of this application. I mean, I feel that the museum, and from everything we've heard tonight, are such conscientious, holders of their space, that I don't think that they would do anything that would be really disturbing. And I was there yesterday. And I also think that it's very important that it is replacing some of the paper that they gave out. There's less paper being used, less landfill, less trash. I think that's all for the good. And so I heartily would support. And I think also the screens are slightly smaller, they're being centered, everything is moving in the right direction as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I totally wholeheartedly agree. Brad.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said so far, and I guess I would just like to say, based on sort of a follow-up to my question, that I'd like to see the resolution specifically state that we do not wish to see advertising or animation in it to
Yes.
sort of trigger any change in that status to come back before us.
Yes, absolutely. I think it's.
Advertising also means sponsorship.
Yes.
Yes. Other comments? Yes.
Well,
Mark.
just to sort of add to that, like information solely related to the activities of the museum, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, which is really, reflective of the presentation that we received. Karen, do you have any specific comments or language that you would like to see in the resolution?
About the brightness or everything?
Anything, everything.
No, I mean, I think we'll just describe, just recapping what they said, that they're centered on the columns, that they're centered on the light. It's like an improvement to what's already been installed for some period of time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, so we are starting to see pretty clearly where this is going. Karen, do you want to make a motion?
Sure, I make a motion to approve, but how do we handle the brightness issue? We leave that as an open question? Do they get back to us with an answer?
We can leave that we can put that as a recommendation. I mean, you're making the motion,
Recommendation,
so,
okay.
but I think that, we really want to acknowledge that they have been very, very good stewards, and that we trust that they will exercise, good judgment to find the balance between, a tool that is usable for visitors, so that it's bright enough, but at the same time not distracting to the beautiful and elegant space. As they mentioned, there are only 30 interior landmarks, and this is one of them. So, and they've been doing a very good job of, keeping it, in a very beautiful and elegant state. So and once again, you're making the motion.
Yeah.
With this language satisfy.
Yeah, so the motion to approve with the language stating that if the LED screens could be dimmable, that it would be appropriate to the lighting level in the Great Hall.
Yeah.
Because it really is a combination of all types of lighting.
Yes.
They're kind of dark and then they seem much brighter, or so like a balance within the space.
Yeah.
Thoughtfully considered.
Yeah.
And
And then all the other stipulations that were raised by other members of the committee. Okay, so everybody has a good understanding of the motion that was made. Okay,
Second.
we need a second. Okay, we can take this to a vote. Right.
Chris,
Yes.
Garcia,
Yes.
Hirschberg,
Yes.
Quebec,
Yes.
Longistico,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
Pedrazi,
Yes.
myself, and a yes. Spandorf,
Yes.
Testa,
Yes.
Zolkowitz,
Yes.
motion passes.
Great. Thank you very much for the presentation. And good luck with visiting other community boards. Thank you for your endurance.
Thank you so much for having us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right.
The third and final application tonight is 51 Madison Avenue. This is the New York Life Building. The application is to include the installation of mechanical louvers within existing window openings at the 14th to 20th floors, comprising the removal of the glazing, utilizing the historic bronze sashes, and retaining the bronze window frames. And we have the applicants here. The floor is yours. You can introduce yourselves and the team, and you can give us your presentation.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Matt Haberling. I'm with West Janney Elsinore Engineers and Architects. We've been working on New York Life for almost 2 decades now, and we've been helping them out along the way. This application is, I'm the architect of record for this project. And this application, as you mentioned, is to seek comments and approval for installation of louvers within 8 window openings. I'll share my screen. Okay, so hopefully you guys can see this.
Yes.
Great. So on the first slide, we just going to give a little bit of history about the building itself and the location. It's located on the northeast corner of Madison Square Park. It's the old site of where Madison Square Garden used to be way back when. Here's a nice historic photograph of the building itself. The building was designed by Cass Gilbert. It's one of, not the last, but one of his last major works within the city and certainly within the country. Here's a postcard view of the building itself as well. You can see that all these views are really taken from Madison Square Park, from the southwest corner. That is where the open views are on this building, and certainly a very representative, beautiful building. Here's a plan view, the street view. You can see that to the north is 27th Street, East 27th Street, Madison on the west, and Park on the east. And Madison Square Park is, as I mentioned, on the southwest corner, the views being in this direction. The louvers we are looking to have installed are actually on the north elevation, which is along 27th Street, which is kind of the maintenance side of the building, really. That's where they have the loading docks. They have the service entrances, things like that are all kind of located along 27th Street, which is actually the side of the building which is least visible from long distances. And the louvers are within this red outline on the 17th to 20th floors, past 2 setbacks. So you have a setback on the 5th floor, you have a setback on the 14th floor. Here is a view from Park Avenue and 27th Street. You can see the red outline where the louvers will be installed, and a close-up view of that from the same direction. The sidewalk shed is in place. Currently, we have a facade FISP project underway, which has been approved by Landmarks. Here's a view from Madison and 27th. You can see it's a slightly more direct view from this direction. It's probably the most direct view we could see from any street of this side of the building from this particular corner. Again, a blow-up view of the windows in question. Here is just a couple of photographs of the windows themselves. They are considered to be special windows in that they are bronze, solid bronze. They are as they were in 1928 when the building was first opened. You can see the natural patina on the windows themselves, the very slender frames, the large glass openings. The windows on these floors measure approximately 5.5 feet by about nine and change, almost 10 feet. So they are large units. The design itself involves basically here's the windows themselves, and then here's a little bit of a better understanding of what the frame is, how it's configured. We have restored a number of these windows on a number of floors with Landmark's approval in the past. And we have a very good understanding of how these windows work. So we have, in fact, been able to remove the glass without damaging the frames or the sashes, and we've undergone a restoration process. You can see the typical head, a typical meeting rail, typical sill, and then the jamb with the upper and lower sashes shown in the same view. Okay. Typical elevations, interior, exterior. And then the louver itself, the intervention of the louver itself, it's located, as mentioned before, between the 17th and 20th floor. The louvers on the east side will be 1/1. So there'll be a louver in the upper sash and in the lower sash. The louvers on the west side would be just over the, just an infill in the upper sash itself, and then everything else would be glazed. The detail, we tried to be as sympathetic as we could to the installation of this, and we tried to eliminate all possible modifications to these windows, being that they're special windows and that they're historic. They're kind of near and dear to me personally, because I've been investigating these since 2015, been doing different scopes. And the solution that we came up with was to install a solid bronze Z-clip, which is actually nested into the existing rebate where the glass would normally be. And the way this is installed is this interior glazing stop is removed. It's simply unscrewed. It comes out very easily. We've done this during the restoration process. The glass is removed, and then the frame with the louver inside of it is installed in its place. And then the stops are put back in, and everything is set in glazing sealant. So basically that's the entire intervention. If it ever came time to removing this, we would simply unscrew them again, and then we'd be able to remove the louvers and put the glass back in. So no other modifications are required or changes to these louvers, to these window openings or sashes. Again, 1/1 louver for the mechanical design. They require, I'm not a mechanical expert, but they do require this type of configuration. And then on the other window, on the adjacent window, they would have this other 1/glass configuration. In terms of the finishes, we were asked by Landmarks to sort of talk about the finishes, and here's a possible one possible finish. We could leave the materials as they are, so they could patina. The louvers are going to be, the frame is going to be bronze, like the windows, and the louvers would be either bronze or copper. We could leave them to patina naturally, or we could patinate them as seen here with a product that's commercially available that would be applied to the copper and to the bronze, and then try and match this finish that we have here on the natural windows, which comes, I think, relatively close on this particular sample here. Again, it could leave it and let it age naturally, or we could patinate it if it was something that would be desired. That basically is my entire presentation. I may have forgot to mention that there are about 2,400 windows in this building, bronze windows, and we are looking at about 8 of them that would require this. And there are other locations, particularly on the 26th floor, where there have been louvers installed. There's a mechanical floor, there have been louvers installed, and a lot of those louvers they fill the entire window opening. And we also have some evidence of historic louvers being installed in the upper sash, where we just by the way they're configured, it does appear that they were originally constructed this way. That's about all I have. If anybody would like to ask any questions, I'd be happy to.
Thank you. So just so that I understand, you're not touching the frames.
Correct. The frames are being untouched.
And please explain this copper Z clip again. I'm just fascinated.
Sure. So the idea is that we are basically creating a window out of louvers. And so the Z clip, it's a 4-sided Z clip, which is all welded together. So it's a structural frame. It's a very heavy bronze system. And then we put the louver inside of that. And then we just attach the louver with screws through the Z clip. And we bed it in sealant, so there's no issue with the sealant. And in order for us to be able to operate this, to get this stop in, this stop is removable. We can remove this stop and we can reattach it and reinstall it. We have to have this clearance here, so this is why it protrudes out just a little bit, just to allow for that access for us to be able to get everything in and out without disturbing anything else.
Got it. And do these louvers move? Can they open and close, or do you set them as they need to be and then they don't move again?
That is an excellent question. I'd have to confirm with the mechanical engineer. However, my understanding is that they would be static and that there could be panels inside that would operate whether they need to be open or closed for their purposes. But that's something that we can certainly confirm.
Okay, and what is behind those louvers? Can you speak to that?
Ducts. My understanding is that there would be ducts inside those spaces. I do not have a floor plan, unfortunately, of the renovation, but they are meant to be air intake and air exhaust for their purposes, for this occupancy. It's going to be an office occupancy.
Okay. Thank you so much. Brad.
But maybe following up on Leila's question, the modifications that you're making, can you talk about the kind of area or percentage of the scope of the building that this is going to be serving, and whether or not you expect that to potentially expand over time?
So the renovation is being undertaken on these 4 floors from 17 to 20. And these are the areas, my understanding is that these are the areas that this would be serving.
So is it fair to assume that were you to do restoration or improvements to other floors, you would have to do the same intervention?
That's not something that I don't believe that this is a typical intervention that we have done. We've renovated other floors and we've taken advantage of existing louvers at other locations. I think on these floors, the issue is that we don't have the existing louvers that we could use. There's also on the lower floors, much lower, we do have light wells, which are not seen from the street. And some other floors do take advantage of that as well. We do have the hardship here that it's very difficult to get run all the ducts through the interiors of these spaces to be able to do that efficiently. This is the first time we've done this after we've restored or we've renovated several floors. This is the first time we're doing this type of intervention.
Okay, thank you. Tony.
Matt, along those lines, you mentioned on some other floors that there were louver installations. So you just mentioned, was that using existing louvers and you changed them, or have you done? Have windows actually been replaced with maybe a different system than what we're seeing here?
So a lot of the louvers, I believe, they're grandfathered into the designation. So those were and this is diagrammatic, and I don't have the information on the existing louvers, but on this floor here, this is a mechanical floor. So most of these are actually blocked with louvers or panels, these floors here. And as I mentioned, there are other windows where we have, like on this type of a window where we have a sash, which is approximately, about 3/4 of the upper sash is taken up with a louver. So there's other examples where we have that, condition. Go ahead.
Okay, and you've been on this building for a long time, so anytime you've interacted with louvers, they've been existing, essentially.
Correct, yes.
Oh, ask one more question.
Go ahead.
So it sounds like the only thing you're actually removing is the glass pane. Is that original single pane?
It is. It's probably not original. These are very large pieces of glass, and they do tend to break over time, so they do get replaced, not infrequently, I would say. But they are a single pane, about 1/4 inch glass that we have in here installed.
Wow. Thank you, Brad.
Can you talk a little bit about the, I guess, the configuration of the Z-clip, why it's oriented out of the building rather than to the interior?
Absolutely. So if we were to put it towards the interior, and let me see if I could draw here. If we were to put it towards the interior, we would have a couple of issues with it. This wouldn't protect our louver as well as this does. I like to sort of have the louver be captured by the frame so that it's more secure. But also we wouldn't be able to access these screws very well. So in order to remove this interior stop, this is just a piece of bronze trim that goes all the way across, and it goes on 3 sides, on the head and on the jambs. We would have to drill through this and into here at about 6 inches on center. These are about 6 inches on center, and make sure everything's lined up and then removed. And then to remove it, we would have to, be very destructive to the louver itself, and then try to remove those screws. So it becomes a much more difficult task to actually get this in and removed. We did try with the design to sort of stay back behind the frame. This is the outside of the bronze frame, and this is the limestone. The windows are recessed. This diagram doesn't show it very well, but the windows are recessed almost a foot behind the face of the limestone. So they're not very close to the outside edge of the masonry. But you sort of see that we try to be sympathetic in that, keep everything as far back as we can, certainly behind the line of the frames.
Yeah.
What is the depth of that Z-clip?
This one is about 2 inches from here to here. This is accommodating a 2-inch louver.
Okay. Thank you, Barbara.
So I just want to ask again, so I fully understand. So the elevation doesn't actually show all the other louvers that presently exist.
Correct. Yeah, it's we did not show that.
Okay.
Okay.
So they do exist in different places.
They do. Yeah.
Okay. I just want to
Tell
make
me
sure
if
I'm
this is
still.
appropriate. My question is really for the committee based on what Matt's offering us in terms of the patination, and to just set this up. My building is directly across the street, and from our 13th floor rooftop garden, I have a wonderful view of this building. And this is one of my favorite buildings for so many reasons, for so many of the details that Catskill gave us, but particularly because of the setback, which I think is really how we have to begin to build again. Put that aside. So is it appropriate to ask the question to the committee in terms of what our thinking is around the patination? Because what Matt's telling us, we could have this bronze as it is, or it can be patinated in advance. And in a past career, I was a sculptor, so I really like this natural patination. So I wonder if I could address that to the committee.
Yes, absolutely. I actually have a sort of like follow-up question, because I'm not totally sure I understand correctly what we're getting. Matt, you mentioned copper, but you also mentioned bronze for the louvers. Which one is it going to be? Do we have a choice? Is there a menu that we can pick from? And does it make sense for us to give our view use? Do we like the pizza with the pepperoni or the anchovy?
I'll have to give you or recommend a kind of a limited selection. And here's the reason: the bronze itself is a significantly stronger material than copper, and I would highly encourage the use of bronze for the frame itself. The louver could be either or. And if there's any questions about, there's a beautiful building another one that I've worked on many years ago, where we actually used together bronze and copper on window or on door cladding at the American Museum of Natural History. When we restored the south elevations at the center portico, they had these beautiful, very beaten up copper clad doors. We restored them and we incorporated the bronze and the copper. It looked fantastic. It really did. Sort of the yellow coming through and the sort of the red coming through together. I wish I had incorporated it. I had the forethought to incorporate a photograph of that when it was done. But that's something that, again, we're open to either option. As a preservation architect, I prefer to see materials age naturally. I like that they show the history, that they basically grow with their environment. These will be relatively shiny at first, but they do turn rather dull brown relatively quickly in this environment. Just the nature of our pollution and our air, they do start to turn brown and then green a few years after that. So there is that process which happens, which I personally prefer to see.
Yeah, thank you so much. So to answer your question, Zoo, yes, this is very much, within the purview of the recommendations that we can make. You can phrase it as a question to sort of like inform the committee, and maybe we can then, turn it to the applicant's representative as, whether they would be sympathetic. But I think we know that, Matt would prefer, original material unpatinaed so that, time gets to play its role. And this is certainly something that we can discuss. Are there any other questions? Yeah, Karen.
I have a fundamental question about why these are required at all. You had said it was commercial office use, and I'm assuming all 4 floors are going to be leased by one company. And is it because the load of the nature of what they're doing, let's say it's a trading floor and it's intense with cooling and air conditioning, that they need additional fresh air intake or exhaust to run their cooling? And is there not enough capacity in either a chiller plant or cooling tower on the roof where you bring ducts down shafts and you serve? That's typically how you serve. But is it because of the nature of this old building, maybe you don't have the modern infrastructure to have that kind of equipment on the roof or on setback roofs, so you have to draw your cooling, your fresh air exhaust from the windows? Because what we see a lot in landmarks is, a major undertaking of a renovation is they upgrade the entire building's infrastructure. So you never have to do this any longer, because this could be a pattern if additional tenants have high requirements and et cetera. So anyway, it's a fundamental mechanical question.
Yeah,
And-
Matt, can
and
you
it's-
address that question?
That's an excellent question. And this is going to be occupied by New York Life. This building is, they used to have tenant spaces within the building, and they're slowly starting to, as the tenants leave, they're bringing sort of the New York Life people back home, so to speak, from outside offices in White Plains and other places. So this building is becoming more and more occupied by New York Life staff, and this will be used by New York Life employees. And the issue with this building is it's actually a deceptively very large building. It is an entire city block, and it does rise about, to the top of that lantern, about 690 feet, if memory serves. So it is a very large building. And this building simply does not have the infrastructure to cool and bring in fresh air from one central kind of a plant. It does do it for certain areas, but certainly not on these sort of intermediate levels. And so the individual floors are treated separately in a lot of ways. And I don't know, again, I cannot speak for what's going to happen in five years and what will be the desire of the client to how they want to occupy this building. But I think, if we come up with a sensitive approach that is easily reversible, that doesn't harm the historic fabric, I think that's something that we can potentially use as an example. And if there is a future kind of a modification, we can maybe use the same kind of modification and have it be easily reversible in the future.
Karen, do you have any thoughts? Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you. Other questions? Yeah, Brad.
I have one fairly, I think, minor question. Can you go to your existing meeting rail section?
Yes.
I just want to understand how that piece is installed, because that's the only one where I don't see that glazing bead. The existing one, sorry.
Oh,
The previous page.
that's correct. So the stops are located on three sides, on the head and the jambs of every sash. And then when you take out the glass, you're able to take it out and you just tilt it, essentially, and just tilt it into place.
So
this
is there one on the sill? Because the detail below that shows one on the sill for the bead. So is it a different condition at the meeting rail?
You're right. It is a different condition at there. Yes, I forgot. Yes, there is one at the sill. The meeting rail, there is none. This is the configuration of the, yeah. So basically it drops in and it gets tilted into place. Yeah.
And you.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Mike.
Matt, could you zoom in on that 2 of 8 photograph of the building so we could see perhaps what another one of those vents looks like?
I'm sorry. This here?
Yeah, could you zoom in and we could perhaps see, you say there are other locations, you can.
That's as good as we have, unfortunately.
So we can't see. So,
Yeah,
Brad?
if you look on page 4 of your PDF, I think.
Here's something. Yeah. What about this?
Or the next one, actually, maybe I'm having, look, one has a different numbering, that one, and then go to the blow up and go up.
those gargoyles.
At the very top, you can see, yeah, right there.
Yeah.
Right above your
Yeah.
cursor, yeah.
Ah,
There's the panels on the mechanical floor. So some have louvers on this floor, some have the panels. We could see that here.
some are blank.
Yeah.
So my question then is, the proposed is to fill up one, the east side with 4 floors with complete 9 foot of window, and the other one just half. Is that right?
Correct. Correct.
Why not all half or all the whole thing to get some uniformity?
That is another great mechanical question. I think for the way they designed the system, they were hoping to take advantage of the way they were running the ducts. I think they found that to be the most economical way to approach this. I'm not sure how the design would have to be modified in order to allow for the half louver only. That's one argument to be made, is that maybe the less windows we influence, the better. So if we were to, it's a point of discussion, of course, if we were to take up this one window bay and leave the others open, maybe that's something that there's an argument to be made for that, rather than, influence more windows or impact more windows.
So Matt, actually, can you speak to the intervention on those window openings where it will be a half louver? How does the half louver meet with the current existing window and glazing?
Let me see if we have that drawn. Basically, this would be it. So we would have the glass on the bottom sash, and we would have the louver at the top. And that would be the only intervention. The meeting rail, these windows are relatively tall, so the meeting rail is probably, right, I'm about 6 feet tall, so right about my head height, probably a little bit above that, you would have the meeting rail. So it is, again, a relatively large window opening.
Okay, okay, got it. Yeah, Brett.
Is this installed from the interior or exterior?
Interior,
So you can do it entirely with the interior without scaffolding?
yes.
Okay. So my recommendation to you would be to actually develop a mechanical master plan. You know, a air intake, ventilation needs assessment and master plan, so that instead of approaching it piecemeal, given that, you know, it is likely that the building is going to, and certainly it is desirable that the building regains full occupancy. And likely the building will remain a commercial office building. I would really urge the you know, the stewards of the building, the owners of the building, to look at this rather than, you know, just doing this piecemeal, which I think, you know, no one is really objecting, but I think that if you had a more comprehensive approach, it would be very beneficial for everybody, quite frankly.
Okay. Yeah, I will talk to them. Obviously, I think that's a very good recommendation. I think one of the issues is that they still have tenants on some of the other floors. So that's, you know, maybe looking for the future, that would be something where we'd say in the future, this is where we would put in louvers to sort of mimic, you know, come up with a less haphazard kind of an appearance to the facade.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also, you know, better assessing the needs. So that, you know, you may realize that, you know, when all the tenants vacate, it will create, you know, a great opportunity, and you don't want to, you know, realize that once everything else is built.
Yep, makes sense.
Okay, other questions? Okay, no more questions. Let's move to public session. To those of you members of the public who are still with us, we appreciate it. And you can use the raise hand function to indicate that you wish to speak. You can do that on Zoom. Any hands up? Okay, so seeing none, we will move to business session, during which we discuss the matter. Tony.
Love this system. I don't think we've ever seen it. I haven't. We've never seen this replacement system before. Typically, it's applicants ripping out the entire windows, all their frames, everything, and throwing the most hideous looking vents up in place. So I applaud the applicant for the time and the insight that they put into this. I mean, it's really showing how much they care about this building, but also maintaining its integrity. I mean, it's such an icon for those of us that live around it. I mean, it's something we see every day. So thank you for that. I love the master plan idea. I think that's huge. It's going to come up. It's inevitable. This is such an amazing system. And that's why we want it to be a master plan, is because it should all be done this way. So that's definitely a great recommendation. We should include that. But ultimately, they're maintaining the important aspects of the window. And I think a bigger component that we need to make sure we pay attention to is it's reversible, like you said.
Yeah.
That's huge.
It's,
I love it.
I
Yeah.
know, I'm honestly, I'm blown away.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is so elegant. This is just so elegant. It's very impressive. Yeah, so.
Yeah, just echoing what Tony says, and I watch on a daily basis when I go to get my coffee, how well this building is maintained. So it's really wonderful. And I think just what Tony said is really sets up the motion. But if we want to hear comments from among us in terms of the patination of the material.
Yes.
I really think
Yes.
the bronze
Yeah.
is the way to go, so.
So, but wait, so the bronze frame and then the copper louvers.
Well, you know, it could go either way. You know, as I think Matt talked specifically, it was at Museum of the American Indian, was it, Matt?
American history.
National history.
Yeah.
Yes, Ralph Cameron. So I think you do it either way, but I think the patination, let that happen naturally, would be a wonderful recommendation for us to make if they would.
Okay.
accept that.
So, so you have you're agnostic to bronze or copper,
Pretty much.
but you are very much attached to use new, let it gain its patina as time makes it.
I want to watch it from my car.
I am totally on board with that. I think my preference would be to use, you know, the original material and let it patina. Other views, are there Anyone around this
I
table?
think that also speaks to how conscientious the owner of the building is, because it's quite more, it's gotta be double, triple, not 4 times the cost to use bronze or copper versus a painted metal that looks like a green patina.
Yeah.
So they're willing to spend the money,
Yeah,
which says a lot.
It's an exquisite building. And am I correct? This was the second Madison Square Garden location.
This was
Okay,
the
so the-
second one, correct?
the first,
Yeah.
the first and second were actually on the same site.
Yeah.
So they built the first, it lived for 5 years, they demolished it
That was
because they
P.T.
wanted,
Barnum's.
they wanted something bigger. They built the second, and then they demolished it, and then they moved to 8th Avenue and 50th.
Well,
They
wasn't
called it
there,
the Hippodrome. They called it a Hippodrome. When it was P.T. Barnum at first, yep.
wasn't there another, we're getting aside here, so I don't want to go too far. But wasn't there another before we ended up with this garbage can
Yeah,
over Penn
there
Station?
was one on 8th Avenue and 50th.
Okay, that's right.
Yeah.
Can I make a
Which is now second.
suggestion?
Yeah.
That the gentleman take the tour of the.
I wait for you every morning and you're not there early.
This meeting, guys, we need to wrap up this meeting. I will allow for chit chat after we take the vote, I promise. Okay, so we are starting to see where this is going, approval and a lot of praise. This is really a love fest, honestly. We are agnostic, so we do support Matt's view that we have a strong preference for bronze for the frame. We are agnostic as to the material for the louvers. It could be copper or bronze, and we're not taking a position, but we want it to be the original material. And we want time to, do its beautiful work, and it will age like a beautiful wine. So this is summarized, and we want a mechanical master plan.
Yes.
This is one of the recommendations,
cute.
so that they think about this issue mechanically, so that it translates into good design. Anything else that should be added? Okay, so we need a motion.
Can I take a shot at it being moved here, and so I can take advantage of all your institutional motion to accept the plan, to approve. Thank you, to approve the plan with, first of all, Leila's recommendations for the mechanical engineering master plan, which we understand might take some time based on as you're taking back space, and then for the further recommendation of staying with the bronze, being agnostic on the copper, and then recommending the natural patinization. And I don't think there's anything else, is there?
And then it's
Fantastic.
reversible.
And it's reversible.
And noting that it is entirely reversible. And
Okay.
all right,
Approval, not accepted.
final vote of the evening.
All right, Briz,
Yes.
Garcia.
Yes.
Hirschberg,
Yes.
Kavak.
Yes.
Augustiko,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
Pedrazi,
Yes.
Slipman, yes. Spandorf,
Yes.
Festa,
Yes.
Zilkowitz.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Fantastic. Thank you for really the
Yeah.
exquisite
Good job.
application. It was really a treat for us.
Thank you very much.
And please let the owners of the building, how much we appreciate the work that they do and the care that they take of the buildings.
Certainly will share that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great
All right.
evening, everyone.
Is there any new business, members of the committee? Oh, my goodness. So wait, new business is new business. It's not an opportunity. And yes, Mike, I'm looking at you. It is not an opportunity to promote a tour. It is new
Is
business.
it time to do that? No?
No.
That's weird.
I will entertain new business. Zul.
First, I don't know if this is old business or new business, but the Church of St. Joseph the Baptist on West 30th Street.
St. John the Baptist.
St. John the
Yes,
Baptist,
yes.
correct. So that's within the general project plan of the governors. That has the ability to be both nationally landmarked. So I don't know where our landmarks commission is with that. So I just have information that I want to give out today, but maybe that could be new business for a future date. I don't know how to go.
Yes, that
presenting
doesn't,
that.
that is more like information. It's not really new business. New business is really, something that you want to bring to the attention of the committee where they would be taking an action. So I can fill you in on
Yeah.
We are already on record on, for this building, it is on the list of eligible sites, for the National Register. So, I can fill those, but, we are already on record,
Okay.
for this building.
So if anybody wants anything, new information on this from Rethink Penn.
Great. Tony,
Probably not new business, but I'm wondering where we stand on the orientation date. I just thought we should chat about that, if we come to a
Yes.
conclusion on that.
Yeah. please
yes,
take-
we can. So let me adjourn the meeting because,
Whoa, new business.
Well, wait, hold on one sec. And one other thing, again, I don't know if this falls into new business, but just for all of us. It's important I know for being on the committee for so long, when we see ideas that applicants are doing that are just blowing our minds, that we see things are possible to do the right way. It's just like a note to say, let's keep it in the back of our heads for when somebody else comes along and say, no, we have to rip it out. No, we have to use painted aluminum and all that. This is a new way of doing that particular type of
Yes.
project. So,
Can I
come under that?
yeah,
Or is it-
let me adjourn the
Yeah, yeah.
meeting because, all the actions that are, under the purview of this meeting have been, conducted. So, meeting is adjourned
Okay, before you leave.
and we can,
Leaving.
wait,
turning off the YouTube.
let's do things properly. And, we can wish everybody good night.